We are now live. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome along to the Council's first budget meeting, which we're not only doing virtual, but we're also doing it with the visual content as well. Before I move to the formal business, and for the benefit of those joining us online today, I'd first like to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Charlie Keith, and I'm the Mayor of Wakefield, and the Wakefield district, that is. And I'm joined today by members of the councils from the district's 21 wards. Gillian Marshall, Andrew Taylor is also with us in the room. I would like to now ask for my chaplain, the Reverend Rob Drost, to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. Last week we celebrated Shrove Tuesday, Pancake Day, where history tells us to eat up and then give up all the rich foods in our homes to prepare for the season of Lent, which then leads us into Easter, a time when the Church grapples with the pain and death of Jesus, but also with the joy of new life and resurrection. Many people I've spoken to are actually fed up of giving up things during this pandemic, so have chosen rather to take things on, new things perhaps, like reading, enjoying walks, exercises in the countryside or parks, or getting involved in community activities like our food banks, litter picking, shopping for neighbours who are unable to get out. So let's give thanks for those people who have taken the decision this Lent to take something on rather than to give something up. So will you pray with me? God of peace and love, we are here to make decisions for our communities in which we serve as elected representatives. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us. May we always act in accordance with what is best for our communities and its citizens. For we ask this in the name of the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac and the God of Ishmael, who calls us to be one in mind and in deed for the good of all people. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that, the Reverend Rob Drost. I would like to remind colleagues to ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the meeting, unless invited to speak, to minimise the potential of background noise disrupting the meeting broadcasting out to the public. If you would wish to ask a question or comment, please indicate that you wish to do so by typing Q or C into the comment box, and please only use the comment box for that purpose. When invited to speak, unmute your microphone and state your name before addressing to the council. Please remute your microphone once you've finished speaking. All members will be allowed to speak for at least once and for up to 5 minutes on each of the reports. Also, the members doing the main nominations and seconding will also be asked to go onto visual. So those, if you don't want to go onto visual, you can just do your question and answer by just doing it on stills and talking. Can I also let members know that the video capacity is available for the circumstances of this meeting? Item 2 on the council summons is to receive disclosures by members of interest in matters under consideration. Will members declaring an interest please identify themselves and their particular interest clearly and complete the usual yellow form. I would remind members that a dispensation was granted to all members to this council to enable them to participate and vote on the council budget and the setting of the council tax. Firstly, colleagues, are there any disclosable pecuniary interests to be declared? Are there any other significant other interests to be declared? And finally, are there any other interests to be declared at all?
Mr. Mayor, if I could come in, I did put a comment in the box. Just in the interest of transparency, just to declare regarding item 5 in the Conservative amendment, which concerns trade union conveners. Yep. I am an employee of a trade union, so just to declare that, and I'd seek advice from the legal officer as to whether I should participate in that vote.
The legal officer is being consulted as I speak.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's an interest that should be declared, so if any other members want to declare that, but it is not one that would prevent voting on this matter.
Okay. And will Jack have to fill in the usual yellow form?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
So that's the advice, Jack. Did you get that? You'll have to fill in the usual yellow form. It will not preclude you from it. Now you've declared that it does not preclude you from taking part in the meeting, but you just have to fill in the yellow form. And anybody else who's in a similar interest, and I see George Eyre is doing the same, Jess Carrington will be in that same boat as you, Jack, as well. So again, filling in the yellow form to you people as well. Okay. No other questions or comments to come in? Okay. Agenda item 3 is to receive apologies for absence. Apologies have been received in advance of the meeting from Councillor Ward. Are there any other further apologies? Can't see any come up on the screen. Well, thank you. Agenda item 4 is to deal with such announcements as I may decide to lay before Council. First of all, colleagues, you will have been saddened to hear that since our last meeting we've received the sad news that former councillors Linda Broom and Brian Hazel had passed away. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families and friends of Linda and Brian. I am also pleased to announce that my charity fund has total so far has raised £8,248, basically for the Macular Society, but with other charities as well, which I shall be distributing shortly. Can I also point out that I am planning the last quarter as Mayor, my last quarter, and I'm looking to continue my Mayor Says Thanks recognition awards until May. Because we are looking towards relaxing some of the lockdown restrictions and because many are predicting light being seen from the end of the pandemic tunnel, I am talking about taking your nominations for key workers in your communities and wards who you feel have deserved a special thank you for helping all of us endure the last 12 months. People who have worked at the cold face of COVID, so to speak, shopkeepers, supermarket staff, carers, bus drivers, dentists. I'm already scheduling in over 20 council departments to have a Skype meeting with them to say thanks to them individually. I am also doing the same at Pinderfields Hospital, where at Christmas I gave out tubs of chocolates and calendars and a card to individual wards and departments, because they are the obvious epicentre of all our gratitude for all that they have done. Especially the nurse who I met, who worked on the COVID ward as a volunteer, and the other nurse who had retired 3 years ago, but came back out of retirement to work alongside her in that ward. True heroes, of which there have been many. Also, last Christmas, we posted a Mayor's virtual Christmas vlog with seasonal entertainment for residents and staff of care homes. I also dropped off Christmas socially distanced goodies to care homes in Castleford, Nottingham, Pontefract and Wakefield. But I must remind you that the nominations that I'm asking you to give me, please, if you could have them to the Mayor's office by next Monday, I think that deserves a Mayor Says Thanks award. I'd appreciate you getting in touch with the Mayor's office with that, if you could, by next Monday. And that, colleagues, concludes my announcement. May I remind the Council that in accordance with the relevant regulations, all votes taken to today's Budget Council will be recorded, which will include the 2 amendments to the budget proposals. The running order and the procedure for today's meeting will be the Leader of the Council has, if she requires, up to 1 hour to speak on the budget proposals. The Deputy Leader will second the budget proposals and have up to 15 minutes to speak. We will then take any questions or clarifications on the Cabinet budget proposals. The Opposition Group Leader will then be asked to speak on the Cabinet's budget proposals, and in doing so, move his amendment to the proposals and previously circulated that have been previously circulated to you. He also has, if required, up to 1 hour to speak. The Opposition Group Deputy Leader will then be given up to 15 minutes to speak on the proposals and second the amendment. I will then open the meeting up to the Council to comment on the Conservative amendment. Any member wishing to contribute to that debate will be given 5 minutes. Before taking the amendment proposals to a vote, I will invite Councillor Ahmed to sum up and exercise his right of reply before taking the matter to a vote. The Chief Legal Officer will then undertake a recorded vote on the Conservative amendment. If the Conservative amendment fails, I will ask Councillor Gordon to move his amendment to the proposals as previously circulated. He has 5 minutes in which he can speak. I will then ask for Councillor Gordon's amendment to be seconded. The seconder has also 5 minutes to speak. I will then open the meeting up to the council to comment on the amendment and put forward by the Liberal Democrat member. Any member wishing to contribute to the debate will be given 5 minutes in which to speak. Before taking the amendment proposals to the vote, I will invite Councillor Gordon to sum up and exercise his right of reply before taking the matter to the vote. The Chief Legal Officer will then undertake a recorded vote on the amendment put forward by the Liberal Democrat member. If the amendment fails, I will then open the meeting up to Council to debate the Cabinet's budget proposals as moved by the Leader. Any member wishing to contribute to that debate will be given 5 minutes. Before taking the original budget proposals to the vote, I will invite the Leader to sum up and exercise her right to reply before taking the matter to the vote. Then, the Chief Legal Officer will undertake a recorded vote on that revenue, budget and council tax, the capital investment strategy and the Treasury management strategy reports. So we shall now move on and proceed with that agenda. Agenda items number 5 and 6 are to consider the Council's revenue, budget and council tax proposals and the capital investment strategy, capital programmes and Treasury management strategy reports. Cabinet considered the proposals contained in this report on the 16th of February 2021 and they agreed the recommendations should be submitted to Council for your approval. I now call upon the Leader of the Council, Councillor Denise Jeffries, to move the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and colleagues, a year ago, when I presented my first budget, I don't think any of us could have anticipated that this year we would be operating under such circumstances. A virtual council meeting, I think, was virtually unheard of for us then. This year has been a year that we could never have predicted, a period of change and disruption across the country and our district. Sadly, it's also been a year of tragedy and grief for many, and once again I send my condolences on behalf of myself and members of this council to everyone affected by this virus. As the virus continues to impact on communities, I think members of all parties would agree that this council and its workforce have gone above and beyond throughout the pandemic. We have stepped up to respond to the challenges and continue alongside our partners to be front and centre of the district's response. Our staff have ensured residents are kept safe, they maintain key services, supported local businesses and undertaken new roles and responsibilities, often at very short notice. Our cooperation with the NHS partners has also been first rate, and I'm delighted to see vaccines rollouts are now well underway in our district. I'd like to take this opportunity to personally thank every employee in this council for their efforts over this year, and I'm sure that all members would wish to join me in that. To the Conservative group, who in almost a carbon copy of last year's one-page budget amendment, I'm really pleased, by the way, that you've gone to so much effort today to put this into the papers, are once again attacking our workers' rights by proposing to remove the funding of trade union conveners. So I will once again repeat what we have said year after year in response. Conveners play a vital role on behalf of their members, and we in the Labour Group believe that it is right and proper that as an authority we continue to invest in good industrial relations. We should also pay tribute to the community groups and voluntary organisations across the district who have worked closely than ever with this council over the last few months. I'm looking forward to building on this relationship in the coming months and years as we go forward together. This council and our local partners have been there for the residents and businesses of this district, when often national government has not. We have also, unlike this government, acted swiftly and decisively when needed. Our work with the community groups via the Recovery Board to set up 9 hubs across the district last year to provide much needed support to vulnerable people is just one example. We understand that people who are suffering as a result of this pandemic should not have to travel distances for vital support and assistance. So we decided to take that support right to the heart of the community. Moving forward, we're working towards providing a greater range of services available at hub locations in the future, including the provision of mental health support, retraining and employment support schemes, as well as looking to increase the number of mental health first aiders across the district, including in our hub. Our mental health champion, Councillor Jessica Carrington, working alongside Councillor Faith Heptonstall, is also bringing forward plans for a Take 5 initiative, which will help facilitate safe spaces across the district for people experiencing emotional distress while outside their homes. I'm wearing my badge, Jess. I hope you noticed. We have spent what has been needed to meet the challenge of this pandemic. In terms of additional spending and lost revenue, including making council car parks free to use, support business and high streets, the cost to this council of responding to COVID-19 will be over 12.4 million by March 22. And I can assure residents when I say that we will continue to find solutions to help our communities and businesses recover. Unlike this Tory government, we didn't hesitate to provide support to tackle holiday hunger. This Labour Council will not let children in this district go hungry, even if the Conservative Tory MP appears to be comfortable with that. Similarly, this council, alongside partners, have stepped up to the plate with the help of local businesses, residents and unions to supply our children with laptops for home learning during this latest year. We cannot allow digital poverty to be a barrier to our young people accessing education, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to everyone who has supported this scheme, including elected members from all parties. The response to this pandemic, not just in Wakefield but across the country, shows that Labour councils and Labour leaders continue to deliver for local people. I'm looking forward to Tracy Braben becoming elected as Labour Mayor of West Yorkshire this year and working closely with her to deliver the better transport skills and jobs that Wakefield and West Yorkshire badly need. We were told do whatever it takes to tackle the crisis by this Tory government. However, we are still waiting for the required funding to materialise. I can assure Council that myself and this Labour group will continue to lobby the government to hold good on its promises, to fully reimburse local authorities for the costs incurred during this pandemic. As well as tackling the ever-evolving situation with the pandemic, I'm proud to say that this has been a year of achievement. Last year we said we would take measures to address the number one thing that residents told us was important to them, tackling antisocial behaviour, and we have. Investing 700,000 in an overall package to strengthen our ability to tackle enforcement in a number of key areas, including public safety, environmental crime, planning and highways enforcement. We said we would work towards creating a more circular economy to support business, and we are, by committing to increasing the amount of money the Council spends with local suppliers and organisations by 14 million a year. Last year I outlined a vision for exploring how the Council might build affordable homes in the future. This year I'm looking forward to being the leader who brings back new public sector renting to the Wakefield district. I'll be saying more on this in the months to come, but plans are already underway for new, high-quality, energy-efficient and affordable council homes that families across this district are crying out for. Homes that will provide long-term security for local people and families. Last year, we also committed to helping local people get the skills and opportunities they need, not just to get new jobs, but better jobs and higher wages. Our Step Up scheme is making an extremely positive impact, particularly in these uncertain times. Our environmental agenda is moving at a pace. The new Resilience Fund I introduced last year, created to support local projects that elected members had in mind, has been well used, funding projects such as improved bus service provision in parts of the South East. I did urge the Conservative group to come forward last year if they had a project in mind, such as the one included in both this and last year's budget amendment for an access bus for rural areas, but they didn't. Our More Money in Our Pocket initiatives are also helping to tackle poverty, including fuel poverty, head-on. We are a council that has suffered from more than 10 years of Tory cuts and attacks on the services that our residents and communities rely on. During that time, we have had to make some hard decisions. However, the budget that the controlling Labour group put forward to you today is not about what we are stopping doing. It's about what we are investing in and how we will make every pound we have work best for the people of this district. This includes an investment of 355 million through our capital programme over the next 3 years to deliver our key priorities and improve residents' lives and opportunities. This council continues to be well managed and deliver excellent value for money, and I'd like to thank Cabinet members as well as our corporate management team and wider management for their work on this. This year alone, they found 11.1 million of service efficiencies and savings, not just to make sure we deliver a balanced budget, but also to ensure that we're able to redirect money and resources to meet new and emerging challenges and make sure we are focused on the priorities that really matter to the people across this district. Being an efficient council also means being a modern council, and the pandemic has taught us even more about the vital importance of digital technologies to deliver services and engage with residents and businesses. To make a step change in the way we work, we are investing another 2.2 million in the council's digital and technology infrastructure. This will help local people get better support and advice from the council, as well as making more services and information available 24/7. Our successful online More Money in My Pocket scheme is an early example of this, giving people digital guidance on how to get immediate support, benefit and financial advice when they need it. We will need to remain focused and efficient and to continue to maximise value for money, even more now as poverty looks set to rise in our district, and we will be. This is a budget for both places, including our 9 towns and 1 city, and it is a budget shaped by the needs of the people and businesses of this district. I want to thank everyone who took part in our budget consultation exercise. Your concerns and hopes and suggestions have been incredible value in shaping this budget. We are continuing to invest in children's services and work to keep children safe. We also know that demand for care and support for vulnerable people across this district is also going to rise. As such, we've made money and resources available to support those in greatest need. An extra 8.9 million in this budget goes to support vulnerable adults and children in areas such as home to school transport and education and healthcare plans. This includes an extra 5.4 million for adult social care and another 1.5 million for children's social care. This money comes on top of major investment in children's services over recent years, and I'm delighted to see that Ofsted's most recent monitoring visits have all recognised the great progress made. I'm really excited today to announce that over the course of the next year, we'll be bringing forward plans for 3 new youth zones, one in Wakefield, one in the South East and one in the North East of the district, ensuring that all our children can access activities, have somewhere to go, something to do and someone to talk to in a safe, positive and accessible environment. It is a priority of this council to support the most vulnerable members of our communities, which is why we are making an additional 1.5 million available to tackle homelessness. We will also continue to lobby the government to funding in Wakefield and other councils to bring forward for homeless people off the streets and to get Wakefield families out of temporary accommodation and back into homes that they can call their own as soon as possible. We're continuing to do our best to support businesses and high streets in the district's economy as they recover from COVID. That is why we've recently asked for people's views on options of keeping 2 hours free parking all across council car parks and country parks for this coming year. If this proposal receives widespread support and Cabinet agrees to this, it is estimated it will cost us around 1.8 million in lost revenue in the coming year. But in my view, this would be a price well worth paying if it supports the wider saving of businesses and jobs in our city and town centres and also encourages residents to continue their enjoyment of our wonderful country parks. Budgets are not only about responding to immediate needs, but also addressing long-term challenges. Last year, we established the Council's first ever directorate charged with directly leading the district's response to climate change. And I'd like to congratulate the Deputy Leader, Jack Hemingway, in being instrumental in leading work on our response to climate change for this Council. Climate change is something that, whatever sceptics say, is already impacting on our district and residents, which is why we need a long-term vision on how we tackle this head-on, and also why we've included 10 million in the capital programme to support work over the next 3 years to take forward the Council's commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. This additional investment is on top of our existing commitments around street lighting, electric vehicle charging and other ongoing work. Our capital programme will continue to prioritise responding to climate change and making sure our infrastructure is robust, in particular in terms of risk of flooding and bad weather. We will also be doing more work on energy efficiency in the coming year, making sure that not only is our carbon footprint lowered and people's fuel bills are reduced, but also that people across this district have warm, insulated homes and we tackle poverty fuel head on. This is also a budget for our high streets. We know that the city centre and high streets across this district are suffering, even before the pandemic and lockdowns, and collapsing national retailers have not helped. High streets and city centres are changing, and there is no going back to the old ways of supporting them. We need to rethink how they best work for local people and local businesses, and we're doing just that. Our city centre master plan will soon be released, exploring new ways to guarantee the long-term viability of Wakefield city centre. We've also built on the success and lessons of our Nottingham master plan with plans for Pontefract and Castleford. I often hear people from Wakefield saying, all the money goes to Castleford, whereas in Castleford, residents tell me that everything is invested in Wakefield. I can assure residents that this is a budget for the whole of the district, 1 city, 9 towns, along with our villages and smaller communities right across the local area. I am pleased to confirm, therefore, that we will also be bringing forward proposals for master plans for Hemsworth, Southampton, South Kirby, followed closely by Horbury, Dorset, Featherstone and Normanton. In the coming years, we will be working with businesses, housing providers and developers to reimagine our towns and city centres. I want every high street in our district to be welcoming, safe and a place where local people and visitors want to visit, shop and enjoy. In the short term, we plan to ensure that visitors and communities are welcomed back with open arms to attractive high streets through our new Spring Clean initiative. As part of this scheme, high streets will be dressed with flowers and empty shop windows will be decorated, not boarded up like the many run-down high streets that have become an all too familiar sight across the country over recent months. If you want to make a better future happen, you need to invest in it, and this council is doing just that. We are putting money and resources into making these commitments real. 13.4 million has been committed to take forward Wakefield waterfront, with another 10 million for wider town centre developments and 4 million for the Nottingham hub. 11.6 million is also going into a new leisure hub for the northeast of the district, making good our commitment to modernise leisure facilities for local people. We are also spending over 43 million over the next 3 years on major projects to connect the district and make travel better, safer and greener. We have also not forgotten public transport. I'm delighted to say that through our hard work, the Council has secured 35.6 million via the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to undertake a series of projects to support and improve our public transport network. This money will also go to supporting and encouraging cycling, improving air quality and having better facilities for pedestrians. To address another of the rehashed Conservative Group proposals, we have already committed to investing an additional 150,000 to tackle potholes in response to the recent rainfall and freezing temperatures. The new funding, combined with 15 million already allocated to highways, including 8 million spent so far on repairs, will allow the Council to continue its work to maintain highways across the district by targeting the worst potholes and carrying out repairs. Even during the pandemic, firms and businesses have sought to invest in our district, and we will continue to work with our partners in the city region, as well as local employers, to bring high-quality job opportunities, as well as making sure that those in work or looking for work have the skills and confidence to take up those opportunities. Local people have repeatedly told us in the budget consultation how vitally important is that green spaces, parks and public open spaces are to them, particularly during the recent periods of lockdown. We have allocated another $500,000 in revenue funding to improve working parks and work with Friends of Parks, and we'll be making more money for projects to safeguard and improve parks and open spaces, including an additional $1 million in allocation to our capital programme over the next 3 years. Our capital programme includes a further 1.1 million to continue investment in wards to support projects identified through engagement with residents, voluntary and community groups. These are likely to include more support for local clubs and facilities, as well as investment in play areas, parks and open spaces. For the coming year, I am proposing an increase in the base rate of council tax by 1.99. We are also proposing a 2% precept to directly support the funding of adult social care in our district. The combination of the adult social care precept together with the increase of core council tax will be 3.99. Currently, there are about 29,600 households in Wakefield who get help towards their council tax through our council tax support scheme. This is made up of 10,500 people of pension age and working age people. This scheme will continue as we support people in need across our district. I take no pleasure in increasing council tax to pay for adult social care. In August 2019, Boris Johnson claimed he had a clear plan to fix the crisis in social care once and for all. I nor anyone else have yet to see that plan. So we continue. This pandemic is affecting people's finance, and yet this Tory government is still forcing them to pick up the bill. Throughout the last decade, we have done everything we can to support residents and to protect frontline services. But the reality is that during this time, Wakefield Council has faced budget challenges of around 200 million, with huge pressures on adult social care, just like every council in the country. I recently wrote to the government calling for them to address this situation once and for all and get on with the job of coming up with a long-term national solution to the funding of care for older people so that local residents are not having to pick up the extra costs via their tax bill. We're still waiting for that response. Mr. Mayor, despite the challenges we face, this is not a time to cut. This is a time to be bold. This budget recognises and responds to the immediate needs of local people and businesses throughout this pandemic, and it ensures that this council and its services remain fit for current challenges and ready to face future ones. It is a budget for the long-term future of Wakefield District, for its city, its towns, its villages and its communities. Mr Mayor, I commend this budget to Council.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jeffrey. An excellent report. Thank you very much. Is the report seconded?
I second the report, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hemingway is seconding the report. Would you like to speak now, please, if you will?
Yeah, I'll speak now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm proud to second the budget on behalf of the Controlling Labour Administration. Before I begin, however, I also want to share in the sentiments expressed by the leader. I send my heartfelt condolences to those who have lost loved ones and who have suffered through this challenging year. Even those who have not suffered directly from the virus have had to bear lockdowns and isolation with an untold impact on mental health, and their sacrifices should not be forgotten. It's through those sacrifices that we've helped to slow and will eventually defeat the pandemic. I also want to thank our brilliant workforce who have never stopped despite the many challenges they've faced and who have continued to deliver top-class services. And let's recognise too the community volunteers and good-hearted souls who have delivered food parcels and supported isolated neighbours for many months. These have been difficult times for us all, but there is light at the end of the tunnel now, and we can draw hope from the NHS vaccination programme, which will allow us to once more resume a more normal way of life. Mr Mayor, this is a bold and ambitious budget, but at its heart it is also a green budget, one that will drive us to become a more sustainable and resilient organisation, and one that is always there to help our residents. We are continuing to invest in communities, despite facing a chronic lack of funding from the Conservative government, who have reneged on their commitment to cover Council's pandemic costs. Difficult decisions have therefore had to be made, but through efficiencies, prudent use of reserves, and the increase in council tax, we've been able to set a balanced budget that addresses the needs of our communities. We've heard the priorities of the public and we've acted upon them. We've responded to immediate needs, but also sought to plan longer term for the future of our district. In my mind, one thing the pandemic has shown us beyond all doubt is the real importance of our parks and green spaces. More than ever, people have flocked to our outdoor spaces for exercise, diversion and refuge. And it's been gratifying to see so many people using our fantastic parks. But we recognise over the years of austerity, some have become worn and tired and in need of restoration. And that's why the controlling group is delighted to be putting forward a landmark investment in green spaces. Wakefield, on top of the exciting plans for stadium restoration which are being developed. Our much-loved city centre park will be restored and transformed, working with local volunteers and the community to rejuvenate elements of each of its three constituent parks, Clarence, Homefield and Thorns. But our district is far wider than the city of Wakefield, and everyone deserves access to a quality park on their doorstep. That's why we're announcing plans to invest in green spaces right across the district, be smaller community parks or larger public parks. And we've established a new steering overseas works at a strategic level. As the leader said, this group will initially be supported by £500,000 of revenue spend to deliver these much needed efforts. But this will of course be accompanied by increased capital investment and a rolling programme of works which will eventually touch every single park in the district. Our aim is nothing less than to see a green accredited park accessible to every community, and plans are being drawn up to make that a reality. To truly enshrine our much-loved parks at the heart of our communities, we'll be working much more closely with friends groups and volunteers to tap into their experience and to provide support for our mutual goals. Yet as well as improving and investing in what parks we already have, we're also creating more green and sustainable spaces, including both smaller areas of woodland, wildflower meadows and other areas of conservation. Ultimately, we are aspiring to create a legacy of entirely new parks. And that's why today I'm pleased to be able to announce our intention to develop a new country park at the heart of the district. We'll be working alongside the operator at Welbeck landfill site to significantly improve the scheme of restoration. We will look to transform the site into a new country park for the benefit of the local community and the district as a whole. These are long-term ambitions, but our commitment to this is now clear and a matter of public record. Welbeck will become a country park. Positive discussions have already been held with the site operator, and conceptual plans are being drawn up for what the park might look like, the costs involved. Our intention is to consult and involve local groups and the community as we progress with this site and for all our parks as well. And I hope to be able to update Council more over the coming months and years. I want to move on to climate change now. As the leader has said, this is a long-term issue for our world and for our district, and insufficient action now would be a failure of all future generations who come after us. It is for them we plan to build a cleaner, greener and more sustainable Wakefield district. We've now published our climate change action plan and have completed our initial consultation process with residents, schools and businesses, and this feedback will help shape our work in the coming years. Our new climate team have been working well, along with many other officers across the authority, delivering on core elements of our programme. This budget will support that work with £10 million of capital investment, which in turn will help us to draw down and match more funding from government and other bodies in due course. But as well as the moral imperative to act on climate change, there are also many hard-headed financial reasons for us to take these actions. Every bill more energy efficient saves the council money as well as carbon. And this is most excellently evidenced by the move to LED lighting on street columns as part of the PFI, which has saved thousands of tonnes of carbon and reduced energy costs significantly. Yet we've already taken many practical steps, such as installing an electric vehicle charging network, switching part of our fleet to electric vehicles, planting tens of thousands of trees, our own buildings and residents' homes more energy efficient. And if you're actually paying attention to my budget speech last year, and I say this particularly to Council, you've noticed that we've already scrapped the citizen paper and its paper version, reducing our environmental impact that way. But we've not cut it entirely. We've moved it online so that residents can still be kept informed of the council's work. These efforts will continue and accelerate in the coming year, and we hope to put forward plans for 2 new energy parks to provide clean green power for many years to come. Finally, in the next few months, we'll be looking to bring forward to Council plans for a renewed commitment to tackle the other environmental crisis, that of biodiversity loss and decline in nature. Many much-loved species are at risk of extinction right in our own backyard. Hedgehogs, bumblebees, bird species, countless others are at risk. And the precious threads that hold together ecosystems, which we all rely on, are becoming torn and weakened. Without pollinating insects, our fruit and crops would fail. Without a healthy natural world, human society would be infinitely poorer. We know that this trend is linked to climate, and the two issues go hand in hand. And as a council, we recognise, therefore, that alongside our climate action plan, we need an up-to-date biodiversity recovery strategy to support nature and the environment in our district. It's not too late to reverse this decline. We need to be optimistic and pull nature back from the brink, but it needs action now. And this Labour administration will do what is necessary to safeguard the natural world in our district for future generations. Mr Mayor, when you look at the work this council is doing across all of its departments and the exciting plans we have in this budget, be it tackling poverty and supporting the vulnerable, turning around and securing improvements to children's services, leading the public health response to COVID-19 across the district, supporting businesses and displaced workers to deal with uncertain economic times, funding infrastructure, sporting facilities, our offer to local communities, and the work on parks, environment and climate I've mentioned. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, we really are a council heading in the right direction. We're proud as an organisation that we have weathered the storm of COVID and come out stronger, providing support for residents right now, but also shaping a more sustainable and resilient council in the longer term. I believe a bright future lies ahead for our districts and our residents, and we must seize it. Mr Mayor, I formally second the budget.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hemingway, for your seconding of the motion. Before we move on, does any member of the council have any questions for clarification to the leader or deputy leader on the budget proposals? Please indicate in the box. If not, then Councillor Ahmed, as leader of the Conservative group, I would like to now invite you to respond to the Cabinet's budget proposals, and in doing so, move your amendment, which has been circulated to members in advance of the meeting. You have up to 1 hour in which to speak. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I would agree that this current budget this year has been definitely a green budget with plenty of recycling taking place from ideas that were Conservative ideas within the budget that we've have previously planned and prepared. So I'll address them whilst I'm going through there. So the idea of free parking for 2 hours was in the Conservative. We rejected for, I think, 2 years running and finally been accepted. So what I would suggest is that you take some of the suggestions that we've given you this year, and hopefully we'll see them in the due course of this year or possibly next year as recycled and green friendly. So the Conservative Party did propose the free parking within the district, and it was believed at that point by certain councillors within the opposition. So Labour group, predominantly Councillor Morley, as unworkable and wouldn't attract businesses. And they're the same ideas that have been replicated. They were obviously led by the Conservatives within Wakefield, and other councillors have make sure this has happened as well. In terms of child poverty, I would like to draw attention to the fact that we are in a pandemic. However, free school meals has existed for a long time, and it's not the first time or the first government to not provide meals during lunch, during summer holidays or Christmas holidays or half terms. We've had Labour governments, we've had Conservative governments, we've had coalition governments, and apart from a raise in school meals falling down to younger groups during the coalition government, no other government has done this before. Although I personally think it was the right decision to offer the school meals outside of school term time, even although someone like myself who was entitled to school meals didn't have this during either a Conservative or a Labour government. So it's important that we acknowledge our own failures and whilst addressing problems that we have. So it was a result of a campaign by a footballer that actually woke up politicians, and a lot of people jumped onto bandwagons to make sure that they addressed that. In terms of trade union conveners, I've pointed this out before, and I'll continue pointing it out. Trade union conveners, I haven't got a problem with trade unions or their conveners. The only problem that I have is that I know that members pay a significant amount of money into making sure that the trade unions run successfully, have the appropriate legal representation. I don't believe it's the responsibility of the Wakefield taxpayer to fund that bill or make things happen. If we're talking about good industrial relations and working relations, there's a number of trade unions that exist in Wakefield district, across the region. So the work that we do with them unions shouldn't be dependent on somebody funding their time. It should be done by the union themselves. So if that is very clear in that I would say there. It is, but addressing our amendments to the budget, I would like to place on record my thanks to the Conservative group and to the officers time in assisting us to finalise the proposal, particularly, and I think it's important that I say this, is Neil Warren and his team. For my time during the council, I've seen a great deal of professionalism. It's important that I draw attention to the council, not just in private. Their professionalism in dealing with, questions that we have and providing prompt information, as always, has been professional and courteous and independent as well. So, but I would like to say that I would like to place the Conservative group thanks to all the council staff that have worked through this difficult time, and it has been a difficult time. I'm sure we all know that, we've all felt it, or we've all seen and the impact on that. I've just seen in my own area in Agbrigg, people that I've seen, all my life being present as part of the community, quite elderly people, elders of our community, and a young lad of 21 years old died from COVID-related symptoms, and it's been very sad times for everybody. But it's been heartening to see the efforts that I've seen councillors from both sides of the chamber, the effort that they've gone through, the effort the NHS staff have gone through, and our council staff who carried on doing the refuse services, making sure the town hall's open, all the things that they do. And it's important that we thank them and acknowledge that the work that they've done. And I would say it's not an understatement to say that we're going through tough times. It's tough times for families and businesses, and we've all, in some ways, personally, been affected by COVID, financially, or a number of us have suffered with it as well. I've seen family members suffer with this. And these aren't problems that are going to go away. And I've spoken to my own colleagues and colleagues across the chamber as well, particularly Councillor Fishwick, and who's seen the impact on businesses within the Wakefield district and impact on families on Wakefield district as well. And these are problems that are not going to go away, and they're going to worsen over time. And we can see emerging problems that will become apparent over time. And I believe the role of elected councillors is probably sometimes not to play politics in these situations. The role of elected councillors and political leaders ensure that we lobby and help support those who need our help in this district. And that's what I've done and the group has done here. And we've put our money where our mouth is. Councillor Stansby, other councillors in here have set up food banks, helped other people, gone out of their own way and time, put their hands in their own pocket to ensure that we've served the people of the district. And we are here to serve the people of Wakefield. But I believe that some of the problems that are going to emerge in the current future, once certain grants and programs end, will be much more. And the effect of COVID will be long-lived. And that's not just educational effects, that's business effects, financial effects. It's important that we here as an opposition hold not only the Labour group to account, but also hold the government and other organisations to account to make sure that we're delivering effective support for these people who are struggling now and potentially will be struggling in the future as well. I know, but I would say that it's important that I would ask other members here today to look at this amendment in a way that they haven't been told. I know most of you have been told which way to vote, but it's important that sometimes in a national crisis, we've seen it in wars, this is a national crisis, that sometimes we put our political differences aside, and which I have done, and other members are here has done, and so as some members of the Labour group as well. And we sometimes look at the best needs of our district and lobby where we can, but also to speak honestly about concerns that we have. So I would say, honestly, that I welcome the packages and grant allocations from government that have been made available to the council, and over and above what was previously announced to help us through the pandemic. And the Conservative group will continue, and I will ask the group to continue to lobby where financial resources may be required to protect our services in the medium to long term. And I'm sure that all members will agree that without central government support, we would have seen a much worsening of matters. That's just business support grants, furlough schemes for self-employed. However and whatever circumstances they took place in, they were needed, are still needed, and once they end, we'll probably be seeing an impact on them businesses. The proposals, as you've seen within here, as it says within the agenda and the amendment of the last paragraph, they're fully costed and delivered for our district. Our proposals listen to the people's concerns and act upon them. And I think there is a bit of a contrasting vision between the amendment that we've done and also the proposals that the Labour group has made here. We believe that we've listened to the residents. You believe you listen to the residents, but we believe that residents are still concerned about matters such as crime, antisocial behaviour, and for that reason we've added on 5 additional neighbourhood patrollers to boost our fight against crime and social behaviour, which is, as elected members will probably know, is one of the main causes of concern for the majority of our cases that we deal with. Our proposal delivered increased investment into that area and the need for more resources, and one of the ways is achieved by cutting the cost of politics, that includes a number of aspects that we've included in there. Something that we have raised on a number of occasions, and I have raised it on a number of occasions, and other members within the group have as well, and with some limited success. And I think this year, again, some recycling, all councillors agreed to reject the increase in councillor allowances, which I think is the first time that's happened. So it's good to see the influence of Tories or myself or others in ensuring that we've asked for less cabinet members, 2 less, which is what it originally was. Their deputies, a reduction in the deputy mayor, and a 50% reduction in their special responsibility allowances. That is at no cost to the Wakefield taxpayer, or it costs us in this chamber, including myself. No more funding trade union conveners, as I mentioned, and that isn't an anti-trade union attack. Nobody can accuse me of that. I've been a member of at least two out of the 3 main unions in teaching, acted and represented people in industrial disputes as well. So there's no way that anybody could accuse me personally of using that as a political tool or anything like that. We've every year since I've been a councillor, we've asked people to pay more. And I know, Councillor Jeffries, I do believe that you are genuine when you say this, that you reluctantly increase council tax, but that increase has been going on since I've been a councillor, since 2006. I'm not sure of the figures before that, but every year 2%, 3%, to the point where the lowest paid, lowest property, Band A, would have something like £120 added onto their monthly bill in council tax. Now, I don't think that's right. I don't think it was right now. I don't think it's right in a pandemic. And although we can look at things like austerity, as you've mentioned, and you could have, that's again recycled from previous years, and government efficiency savings to balance books, etc. However, the reality is that when we decide how much council tax is increased, and we place that burden on families, where if they're on furlough, they're 20% down on what they're being paid. Mortgage, they've got a mortgage. The mortgage holidays are over. Most people are still paying their bills, are having to overcome difficulties with a 20% reduction. I don't think it's right or proper for me to stand here as somebody, somebody in quite a reasonable position to say, I think it's better that you pay more. And you can argue that it's 20 pence in a week or something like that. But if we look at the overall sum of the increases over the years, it's far too much. It's not right. And has there ever been a time in council history where we've ever come back to people and said, you know what, we're having a good time nationally. What we're going to do is reduce your council tax. I don't think there ever has been a time. So I can't really agree with an increase in council tax. It's not something that I can support continuously. But however, if there is a need, as I've said this to many times, there is an adult healthcare problem within this country with an aging population, which brings many benefits, but also brings problems because there are health-related problems and support that we need to provide for our own family members, and we can see that. And it's important that we honestly say that sometimes that might involve a council tax increase. And I'm acknowledging that, because I'm being honest and open here. But I believe that has to be addressed by national government and local government, and possibly whatever mayor comes into place has to address that issue as well. And we want an effective mayor that raises the baton of Wakefield in amongst the other regions, and not just becomes Leeds-centric or Bradford-centric or any other there. So we want to hold our own in there. So we believe in strong local economy, vibrant high streets, and we look forward to the government in the weeks ahead to build Wakefield City Centre and the wider district, which is the conservative motto, which is to build back better. And I genuinely believe that we need to get behind that and make sure that we come out of this pandemic much stronger, much better. We create jobs, we create job growth, and particularly for those young people who've left education, 16 years old, without having sat GCSEs, who are now in sixth form colleges or universities, worried about their future. Some of them part-time jobs, them non-essential shops have not been open, and they've not been able to provide for themselves. We need to give a vision of hope to these people, the same hope that was given to all of you. We owe that. It's an example of stewardship, and I genuinely believe that we should leave this planet in a better state than we arrived with. And so that is important, that we give hope to the next generations in there. But that isn't going to be done by taxing people, or it has to be done by job creation, job growth, looking at Wakefield as a university town, creating educational opportunities, challenging unions when they say wrong things, and say, is it right to say, should we open in summer holidays? These are questions that we need to ask, because there's a widening gulf that we can pretend and ignore between those that have got things and those that haven't. The educational gulf is not going to be covered in probably the next 5 to 6 years unless serious action is taken. I'm looking forward to the action the government's going to take, but as local authority and other things, we need to make sure that we're challenging our governing bodies to make sure that the young people who've missed out on education, they've been taught at home, they've missed out on education, don't end up being in that disadvantaged group where we create a poverty cycle within areas. The Conservatives have, and we always will include in our budget, the state of the road, as Councillor Jeffries has acknowledged, is as a result of the winter, and gritting has created a number of potholes, a number of problems, and we've added in extra into the capital programme to bring the network up to standard. And we also believe that we should lobby government, and government has come back to us, whether it's a small amount of money or a large amount of money, any is helpful at this stage here. And we believe it's important that that money is invested into our road infrastructure so we have good, accessible roads for all of us, and we keep the district moving as well. For that reason, we added £220,000 for additional repair of 5,000 potholes, and I'm hoping that the Labour group will also agree that this is the right move to make. In terms of our rural constituents, which I'm sure Councillor Sanders will also mention, and Councillor Harvey, Councillor Binns, we believe that the rural constituents have not been able to possibly access the city in the way that we have been able to access. And I know we talk about green initiatives. I'd be very interested if we were in a council meeting, how many councillors would have come in a car today, and how many of us would have cycled down or used public transport. So sometimes we should act upon, not speak about certain things, but act upon them as well. But we're opening up the city, and we're asking for the rural parts of the district to be able to access our city centre, to make it a vibrant place, to come in the city centre, meet people, and health and well-being of them people is suffering because they haven't got the access. Maybe they've not got a driving licence, maybe they're not driving. And we've put in our budget, as we've done before, 59,000 into the capital programme to fund the acquisition of an access bus, and 56,000 for revenue to fund the running costs of one to improve public transport provision in our rural areas. And this is a much needed lifeline to the communities that feel left behind. And I think it helps our city centre if we get people in here staying in the city centre and shopping and spending their money here. During the past 12 months, there have been enormous strains placed on mental health and the welfare of our district citizens. And as we come out of the latest lockdown, we are gradually put the pandemic behind us, moving forward with a very successful vaccine programme, which I'm sure you will all agree, that is bringing us closer to getting our lives back from the devastating impact of coronavirus. We must not do everything we can to support those suffering with mental health and well-being. And I know this because I've spoken to many different organisations within the Wakefield district that work within community centres, work within Turning Point, example, talking therapies. And they're saying some of the people that they're coming across and some of the people that they're unable to access is devastating. Some of the mental health strains that families are having, that are unable to be able to speak to their grandchildren, their parents, not able to meet them, not able to hug them, not able to speak about their problems. And the drain that these people are having, and it's just a worrying powder keg waiting to, it's there in front of our eyes exploding. I'm not going to ignore it as a Conservative group, and I'm sure other councillors will agree with me, we shouldn't ignore this. So we've put forward, and this is very carefully thought out, the cost of investing 6 extra mental health support workers to tackle the crisis in mental health and well-being created by isolation and anxiety because of the pandemic and lockdown. But I believe that is a very, very important thing. So I want people to think when they're voting, which way they're voting and what they're voting against. Is it ideological reasons, or actually do they believe in what they're saying? So in summing up, we've invested 6 extra mental health support workers, better rural transport, 5 extra neighbourhood patrollers, we're tracking 5,000 extra potholes. That is, add some of these proposals from previous years. They are some of them you've taken and recycled, which is really great. And I've always said, and I agree with tackling climate change, but I do not and never would agree when it's done where people who barely able to afford, for example, like taxi drivers or businesses, where we make them pay for the mistakes of an international issue. And I always believe that morally we should do whatever we can do, but not make our residents suffer with the impact of climate change when we are a very small country, and the impact has to be done across different countries such as China and India, who are probably polluting 30-40% of the carbon in the whole, where we're a contributor, I think it's something like 2%. So it's important that I extend my support and the group's support that we address the issue not at the expense of residents' pockets, but we do it in an organised way where it doesn't impact on people who are having been forced to buy hybrids, or people being forced to do certain things in the business, which is coming at such an expense. So this green growth and green economy that we're trying to create is not done at the expense of other people's jobs. And the final thing I'm going to say, the option that we have for elected members is to send a message to our constituents, our taxpayers, that we believe that as politicians, we do listen to what you've got to say. You all have a choice to accept these amendments and say that we are learning the lessons from COVID, which require politicians to work together for the greater good, the good of people. This is a national pandemic, requiring a national effort to do something different and break the mold. Or we can carry on as usual, which I'm a bit sadly pessimistic we will do. The choices are clear. We want the best for the people of Wakefield. And I'd ask you today to put aside some of your political ideologies and join us in accepting this amendment. So I commend this amendment to the Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Ms Stansby, as Deputy Leader of the Conservative Group, would you now wish to comment on the proposals, and in doing so, second the amendment as proposed by Councillor Ahmed? You have up to 15 minutes to speak. Councillor Stansby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to Neil Warren and all his team and all the officers who've been involved in this budget process. We're in unprecedented times, and you've done a fantastic job. And I'd just like to say thank you to all the officers at the council. You've been incredible over the past 12 months. I've worked with many of you to make sure that nobody's gone hungry, and children are fed during school holidays. We have no control over what certain members of Parliament vote for, but we as councillors make sure that nobody in our wards go hungry unless they want to. It's good to see that the ruling Labour group have adopted some of our policies from previous years. Yeah, I do get your point about rehashing some of our policies, but that's because we believe that they're good policies and they're worth rehashing, and also we hope that if we keep bringing them to the table, you'll keep accepting them, and we can persuade you to adopt more of our policies. We don't mind too much if you claim them as your own, but we will remind you that they were ours. Last year, as you're aware well, our group proposed saving £375,000 on the Hepworth concession agreement. You voted against that. Not sure why. This year, we're proposing that instead of giving 125k to the Hepworth and 89,000 to the trade union conveners, that we use that money to increase the adult health budget by 180k. Now, we have this discussion time and time again about union conveners. I've been a member of the union. I've paid my subs. There is no reason, like Councillor Ahmed has said, there is no reason to expect the Wakefield taxpayer to pay for those in addition to the subs that they're already getting. I think we need to fund, in addition to the strategies already proposed by Councillor Carrington, I think we need to fund those 6 much needed mental health support workers. The past 12 months, they've been so difficult, and many have suffered both physically and mentally, and they will continue to do so for quite some time. Over the past month, I've been supporting 2 families who've been
absolutely devastated by suicide. One young man who was the only carer for his disabled mum decided to take his own life. He's physically recovering now, but is bedbound, but he needs extra help with his mental health. Another family lost their mum due to suicide as she couldn't cope any longer with the death of her son due to childhood cancer. So I feel, and I'm sure you do agree with me, that adult social care should be the priority for the forthcoming year. I mean, I could come up with so many more examples. And yes, you know, I've had a chat with Jack about the way the council goes forward with becoming carbon neutral by 2030, and it's a good priority, but I do think adult social care should be our main focus for the next year. So in some respects, although I'm against tax increases in principle, I do support the added 2% social care levy this time, but that is the only part, providing that the extra millions is spent on providing care for our vulnerable adults. We should not see a repeat of 2019-20 when 21,000 of adult care budget was spent on children's services following the inadequate Ofsted rating, especially when we're looking at 89,000 a year given to the unions. I wholeheartedly agree with reducing the Chief Executive's revenue budgets by reducing the elected members' special responsibility allowances and abolishing the roles of deputies. This would save us 157,000, which, as we've heard, would fund an additional 5 neighbourhood patrollers. I'm sure, like me, you've experienced increased antisocial behaviour in your wards due to lockdown boredom. I'm very pleased to hear about the children's hubs, but would consider that you might put one in the northwest of the district, given that it's got the 4th largest high school in the area. In support of my party colleagues and also in line with the Council's commitment to becoming carbon neutral by 2030, we should use some of our identified savings in the amendment to fund the access bus in rural areas. No doubt Ian and Sam will talk about this later in the debate. And of course, no budget would be complete without mentioning potholes. The recent adverse weather, combined with ever-increasing new developments, has led to some roads in my ward looking like an assault course, and I don't say that lightly, honestly. I wish I did have a 4x4 because I've really needed it in some of our roads. So, in addition to other investment in the district, our budget amendment would see an extra £5,000 potholes funded by prudential borrowing. This has been costed out. You know, we've had approval by the finance department, and I believe we've proposed some excellent amendments and ones that will support our residents during this time and in the future. So I would ask that you would support the amendments rather than maybe sticking to the party lines. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stansby. Now take comments on the amended budgets as proposed. The amended budget, that is, as proposed by Councillor Ahmed. This is subject to the normal 5 minutes rule, and members are only permitted to speak once on the proposal. Does any member wish to speak? Please indicate in the box, if you will, that you wish to speak. Speakers will be taken in order as they come up on the comment box. Okay, I've got, first of all, with comments, I've got Councillor Matthew Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's good to see that the Conservative budget has been, budget has been dusted off the shelf and fetched out once again. One budget, many occasions. This is my 9th budget meeting, Mr. Mayor. It's the 9th time these proposals have been before me. Yeah, unbelievable, really. Mr. Mayor, as somebody that's talked to quite a lot of people in my own ward and around the district, it's funny enough, nobody ever mentions anything about deputy portfolio holders. Nobody mentions anything about cabinet member holders and the cost of them. What they mention to me, Mr. Mayor, is obviously the roads, policing, antisocial behaviour, public open spaces, adult social care, children's education and care, and all things that we are tackling in our budget that has been announced. So I do think some of the stuff that they've put in here, Mr. Mayor, if the opposition group hadn't have supported the austerity measures over the last 10 years where we've seen, is it £190 million stolen from the people of Wakefield, that they've all got up and supported, maybe in the situation we are, we're having to raise council tax, but hey ho with that one, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the opposition have just made a lot of remarks around about free car parking. I think I need to remind them what they said last year, Mr. Mayor, and the year previously, where they got my idea from. Last year, they didn't say anything about, they said, to put £50,000 to one side to do investigations to 2 hours free car parking. I don't know where they got £50,000 for to look into consultation, because it costs nothing like that, Mr. Mayor. What we've done is the idea that I put forward 2 years ago when there was saying something else about free car parking. When I made a point at council, the thing that would work for the Wakefield district is the anytime 2 hour that I know works in other local authorities. The business that my family run benefits from that, and that's the reason why we put it in, Mr. Mayor, because it will benefit our city and our town centres and many residents and visitors to our area. So I'm really pleased we are pushing forward with that, Mr. Mayor. But Mr. Mayor, a direct question to Councillor Ahmed now. I'm interested on the Part H, the £59,000 for the acquisition of a bus for improved public transport. Can you just tell me what sort of bus he's actually looking to provide?
Councillor Morley, I'm not taking direct questions at the moment. I've got loads of people who want to ask questions, so I'll try and get
Councillor to my question in a minute, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll do it in his summing up.
And also, where's he going to get the funding from to run it from? The Wakefield City bus costs 200k a year to run, and that's partly subsidised by the Combined Authority. I'm also interested about the money that they're putting forward for potholes. Mr. Mayor, can the Leader of the Opposition please make comment on the fact that the Conservative government, and can you ask this question, why they've taken £400 million out of highways improvements across the country? That's £1.5 million to the Wakefield district. Can I ask that question? He's saying he's got further fundings coming on, they've lobbied for it, but they've actually cut it by 22%. Can the Leader of the Opposition please answer that question as well? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll ask Councillor Ahmed to do...
Mr. Mayor, can I just say you did ask for comments as well?
I did. Go on, yes. But what I'm saying is I've got a list of people who wants to make the comments as well. So what I will do is I'll ask for Councillor Ahmed to address those in his summing up, please, and answer those questions as well. I'm asking for Councillor Kevin Swift to come next with a comment.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. I want to address myself primarily to Councillor Ahmed's comments about council tax, because the reason why council tax goes up is directly, absolutely directly down to the policies of his government. Right from when Osborne came in as Chancellor in 2010, the government has pursued a progressive, deliberate policy of shifting the balance between how much local council spending is funded by central grant and how much of it is funded by the local taxpayer. You've only got to look at the figures in this particular these budget papers, where the revenue support grant amounts to 7% of our total revenue budget. Now, traditionally, the money was far more evenly shared, and traditionally, poorer places like Wakefield, actually, the majority of spend came from the government, and the minority came from the local taxpayer. We moved to a situation where the money is absolutely overwhelmingly raised on two very, very inappropriate tax systems. The local council tax, widely accepted as being one of the most regressive taxes around, that falls disproportionately on poorer people. And I don't think I need to say much about just how unsuitable the current business rates system is. And yet, explicit government policy, remove the revenue support grant, down to 7% now, and the cost of living increase in that revenue support grant this year, in that budget report, £100,000 to cover inflation costs against that particular thing. In other words, the Conservative government very deliberately are placing the burden for local services massively on local taxpayers, massively on a regressive tax system that bears most heavily on the people who are actually the least well off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Swift, and thank you for your brief comments there. We're going to go on now to Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding regeneration and economic growth, the regeneration of our town centres must be the top priority of the council budget, but it appears to have gone without mention. The key point needs to be the revitalisation of our two shopping centres in the Ridings and Trinity Walk. If these areas both fail to recover post-COVID, our city will see a devastating loss of income. They are the heart and soul of our community, and without specific program to ensure their regrowth, we may never truly see them to recover from this pandemic. As such, I feel the council needs to lay out a detailed plan to drive people back to the shopping centre on the high street, and after so long using Amazon and all other online retailers to purchase everything that they need straight to their homes. Additionally, I think in the budget there is an increase of 0.2 million funding to the markets team. It is enough to ensure the support of economic recovery, with a large detrimental impact of the lockdowns have already had on the small businesses within the region. So we must ensure that every business owner is able to access the support, and then they can fight the recover and come back to truly contribute to our economy in the district. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. On next to Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Neil Warren and his team for the work they've done presenting this budget. It is a Labour budget without anything in it from the financially approved Conservative amendments. I appreciate there's money being set aside for public transport. I hope a lot of that goes into rural ward transport. Let me speak about rural ward. I'm not just meaning rural ward, where I'm an elected member. I'm speaking also about Ward 5. Abercroft is a stone's throw away from 3 supermarkets, the Co-op, the Aldi and the Asda. The bus service has been completely lost. In Abercroft, it's far easier to get on a bus and get into Barnsley. An authority, well, in South Yorkshire. In Netherton, the bus service has been reduced yet again from 1 per hour to 1 every 2 hours. Children now having to rely on family cars to get to school. Residents relying more and more on their own transport. The number of residents using public transport becomes less. Bus operators, seeing their figures reduced, cut the service even more. The system is working backwards and not doing much for the local economy. I know the Conservatives could achieve a better budget. As a member of Abercroft Parish Council, Conservative-led, we have successfully managed our budget, managing to reduce the parish precept. I think the Conservative amendments are excellent. A close look at them. Take a close look at them. You lot, yet again, have totally disregarded them. You do it year on year, when residents throughout our authority seem to appreciate them. Our free parking policy comes to mind. Before a U-turn, you wouldn't entertain it. I thank you for adopting it, along with many, many residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sanders. I'm moving on next. A comment from Councillor Jackie Spate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Every year the Conservatives put up an amended budget which tends to include an acceleration and reduction in the concession agreement for the Hepworth. And every year I respond and say, are you not the party of business? This year, I think this is even more pertinent, given that we've had the pandemic and businesses and all organisations have struggled throughout the year. The Hepworth has been closed for most of the year, in line with government guidelines. It's had very little income from visitors. It's had to make redundancies. Whipping away the concession in this way could affect its stability very, very seriously indeed, which would have financial consequences for the council. And can I not say, do you never consider the economic impact the Hepworth has on Wakefield district? It brings significant investment to our district. And I have to say that they were instrumental in introducing us to Talyard, who are now developing down there. And they're going to be bringing in new creative industries. The Tory party talks about, as Councillor Deem, I think, said, building back better, levelling up, about delivering new businesses. To risk the financial stability of the Hepworth would be totally counterproductive to all of this. It just seems to me that that is out of step with your own party. And not only that, I think you're probably out of step with the Wakefield Tory MP, who I understand has pledged support to the Hepworth. All I can say is, do I sense an element of division between the MP and the Tory group of this council? Because it actually feels like that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spate. I'm moving on next to Councillor Carl Johnson.
Good afternoon. I just want to make a few comments. Obviously, I'm supportive of Wakefield and the residents. And obviously, being a musician, I've been out of work for a year, so I congratulate that hopefully by April, May and June, hopefully people should be going back into work. But I'd like to just mention the Wakefield Theatre, obviously what support we're going to do about, what we're going to do for local business. But more than anything, when the government's been spending billions of pounds on furlough, how come the councils still have around £110 million in reserves? When is reserves actually spent to actually help the people of Wakefield? The government, as I said, has spent billions of pounds. So when exactly do we actually spend some of the reserves that are actually getting larger, not smaller, but we seem to be increasing our council tax? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carl Johnson. Up next, I do have a comment, as you can see on the screen, from Steve Tully, but I think it's just a comment. I'm moving on to Councillor Michael Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make the point regarding the budget for road repairs. I think my Councillor Morley touched on it before. The government have cut 375 million from the budget right across the country for repairing road damage. That's a 28% cut to the whole of Yorkshire. And yet, in this amendment, we've got the Conservative councillors asking for the council to borrow 220,000 to fix potholes. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Your government's cutting 1.5 million from this district, and then you want us to borrow 220,000. I mean, how do you think prudential borrowing works? Eventually, we have to pay this money back. You're the government that constantly tells us and our residents that there's no magic money tree, and yet you're asking us to borrow some to fix something that your government's cutting. I go back to the point that Councillor Stanby made about making residents pay for an international crisis. That's exactly what your government have been doing for the past decade. It's not our fault, it's not our residents' fault. That what happened back in the financial crash, and yet you are cutting this council's money, bringing us to our knees year after year, and yet you sit here and rehash the same old stuff time in and time out. We're absolutely sick to death of hearing it. I'm not even going to go into each individual part. If you want to know what I think about each part, go back to 2020 and you can replay the video for the council meeting there. I think it's absolute ludicrous notions that you put forward, and I think you need to take your head out of the sand and talk to the people in this district. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Graham. Up next, I've got Councillor Nick Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've listened with great interest to the comments that have been made just recently. I had no input in the Conservative amendment, but I think they've put some very valid points through. Throughout this pandemic, it's been going on over a year now. I think the real issues, obviously a lot of people have sadly lost their lives, but real issues are going to come very shortly when we actually come out of this, and the mental health issues are going to be massive. I've recently lost one friend who's committed suicide. So the point that the Conservative group put about health issues and getting people to support is a very, very valid point. And if you keep banging on a door long enough, eventually somebody will open it up, as proved by the car parking issues that I'm really glad that the Labour Party have put forward. And I might have this misguided belief that the Labour Party are actually a party of business. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farmer. And up next, I've got Councillor Faith Heptonstall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate what the leader has already alluded to. Just to say that this council has recognised and continues to recognise the mental health issues faced by lots of our residents, and we continue to invest in mental health services. And I think it's really important to say that we have already made key appointments in mental health. We have a very, very active mental health champion, and we work together to support all our staff and residents wherever we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Faith Heptonstall. I don't see anybody else who wants to make a comment on the proposals. I have a late one coming in here from, I've got two more. Councillor Gordon next.
Hi, I should have unmuted myself now, so hopefully you can hear me. It's again, I feel like we are living in Groundhog Day in some respect, and I echo that sentiment. I do take issue with, we've heard both from the Cabinet Member for Highways that he apparently pioneered free parking. We've also heard the same is apparently true from the Leader of the Opposition. I think if we could just try and actually deal with the reality of actual facts. Free parking is something that's been around for a long while, and I don't think anyone in this council chamber is the first person to ever suggest it. What I find disappointing, once again, with the Conservative budget amendment is that we have all this talk about working together or we can carry on as usual. Now, once again, for me, working together is approaching people outside of council chambers or virtual council chambers and trying to work collaboratively to do things. Now, again, it won't come as any surprise that we're all being asked to support this amendment off the back of a speech today. Now, if the Leader of the Opposition had wanted support from me, if he'd actually approached me outside the meeting and spoke to me and said, well, what do you think about this? Then I would have had that conversation, but sadly it wasn't very forthcoming. I do think that, once again, going back to the Groundhog Day comment, we can go backwards and forwards. We can play the game of who's to blame for the situation we're in. Fundamentally, it is a matter of fact that right now, if we were to get significant funding and a proper agreement on revenue and cash to come from central government, that would alleviate some of the problems that we as a local authority are facing, and the same for other councils across the country too. Now, I do still take issue with the fact that we seem to always end up in the situation where we hear the austerity card bandied about. Now, I would just like to remind the council administration that Ed Miliband promised to cut spending if he won the election, saying that it would be a continuation of austerity under a Labour government. And we had the former Chancellor of the Exchequer saying that they'd cut deeper than Thatcher, with the Labour government back in 2008 being the ones who started introducing benefit sanctions. So if people could kindly stop pretending the holier than thou and operate in the realms of reality, that might actually do everyone a bit of a favour and make us all actually get a better reputation along with residents. People are sick of us bickering backwards and forwards. It's all talk and no substance as ever from both sides.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gordon. I'm going to come next to Councillor Cruz.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of brief comments, please. Yeah, it's interesting that the Labour group now approves free parking when the Conservative group have been calling for this for years and years. I'm really pleased that you've done this for our residents. But again, I'd like to remind you that we have called for this in the past, and Councillor Morley, I actually directly called and asked for free parking for the Rhubarb Festival, or at least 2 hours free parking, and you flatly refused on the grounds of it would be bad for the economy and we couldn't afford it and bad for the environment. I find it amazing what you can do suddenly when you can call it your own. And also, to Councillor Graham, I'd like to say also, you can't talk about how much we need money at the moment when you are paying vast sums to unions that have already been paid by yourselves in subs. And that's what I think. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cruz. Councillor Harvey, you've already had one go, and I did stress at the start of this you can only speak once on the debate. I'm going to take up next with Councillor Betty Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief because I'm sure other people have other comments to make as well. I just want to refer back to some issues that I've heard here today. And I believe there were some comments about from Councillor Harvey about our towns and what we should be doing in town centres and what have you. I'm just wondering how much of the leader's speech has actually been listened to and understood about comments that's gone in today, because there's massive investment in plans for our city and for our towns across the district. So that is already part of the budget. And I'm sure that'll be welcomed by everybody in terms of the downturn in the economy that we've seen through the pandemic. But of course, the larger corporations as well suffering as a consequence of that. So please check out the leader's speech before you actually make comment that isn't actually valid, because the investment and the programme is still going on there. Again, I'm just been listening to Councillor Thomas. And I'm sorry, but, you know, the rhetoric of what he said is far from the reality of where it started. I ought to remind you as well, Councillor Thomas, that it was your Liberal group combined with the Tories that actually started in a package with Cameron and your leader of the Liberal Party that actually said about the years of austerity. And in those years of austerity, the issues that came up were the cuts in health, including public health, and on top of that, all the implication there was for delivery of services across the patch. So let's go back to where it really started and how those austerity cuts have made such a difference across the authority. And I do apologise, it's called Councillor Gordon, I do apologise, Tom. But anyway, that's where it started, and everybody's picked up through the poorest in our district the consequences of it. And can I just also say, and it's got to be reiterated today, the leader addressed it in her speech, but I am going to say it again. The public health, the mental health trusts and all the trusts across our district suffered cuts of immense difficulty and cuts in the services. And mental health was one of those that at one point had a serious cut in delivering its services at a time when people were under pressure through austerity. I've always been an advocate, having worked in the mental health field, I've always been an advocate of mental health. And over the years, I have worked tirelessly to look at what can be done in consultation with other people about investment in our mental health structure to provide for the people of the district. And we're not on our own in this. We're not on our own. And I will continue to bang the drum about it because it is important. But it needs the investment, not the cuts. And we've got to make sure that any investment now actually makes up for the cuts that happened all the years, because that up to press has not happened. And I want again to reiterate the point. Our council tax is 1.99. The 2% that's in there is as a result of the government over 4.5 years failing to produce the paper that was supposed to be the end-all and be-all of sorting out the care for the elderly and the cost. Then the Prime Minister, as of now, when he was elected, he was going to do it. And up to press, there's been nothing. So as a result of that, the people of the district have had 2%, not the 3% that the government said you could put on, 2%, which is the government reneging on its delivery of funding for the health care of our elderly and social care and passing that tax on to local people. And that's the position we're in. And if you'd rather not pay that 2% or advocate that we don't, you tell us how the people in need out there and the elderly in care and everybody else that needs social care are going to be looked after. Because the government that your party as a leader supported in terms of cuts originally, we're now picking up the tab for. So let's look at history, where it came from, and actually say who started it, and we're picking up the tab in Wakefield as the residents are. And every time I have a meeting with anybody, I find out how deep those cuts went. And we're just trying to get back into some situation where we're going to have an NHS again that is now going to have another restructuring at a time when we're dealing with a pandemic. So let's be real about these things and let's show the people out there why we're having to do the things we're doing. And this is the reason I believe that tax in the budget today proposed is one that we will see the growth that we deserve and the care for our elderly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rose. I'm moving on now to Councillor Carrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo what Councillor Hepton-Stalls and Councillor Jeffries have said really regarding mental health support. We are working closely with all the mental health organisations and alongside public health to support council staff and everyone across the district. We've also reacted to the early intervention stages regarding suicide support where it's been necessary to do that. We've actually done it with some of the businesses across the district as well when we've been made aware of it. So we are doing everything we possibly can do. Regarding Take 5, we are at the point now where we're nearly ready to go to the pilot stage of it. We're just ironing out the final bits to it, the details. So we are ready to start implementing the pilot for it across the district, which will obviously put the safe places there for people when they start venturing out again. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carrington. And finally, I've got one more. I'm going to go to Councillor Darren Byford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of points I'd like to make. The first one being, Councillor Saunders, thank you for referring to, I think the correct expression that you used was "you lot over there." Thank you for that. That was really appreciated. I also see on the comment section that Councillor Harvey has made a comment about your budget book must be different from mine. We all heard the speech from the leader, and the leader said it is Wakefield, 1 city and 9 towns. At that 1 city and 9 towns, she then listed the places that had master plans in place, which are the foundations for moving our city centres forward, for investing in the future, which you know, Councillor Harvey, because you have been part of that process. And then the leader also listed the 9 towns that were all going to get their own versions of master plans, including ones that haven't been part of that process before. Master plans are important because they highlight what we can do, and it works with partners to what we will do to deliver vibrant high streets. Again, Councillor Harvey, you've been involved in that, and you know better than to say that we're ignoring them. You also then mentioned the fact that there was a small sum of money put aside to support the markets. That's true. And that is on top of the capital investment that was approved by Cabinet in the last 12 months of around £4 million to support the marketplaces across the district. So thank you for raising those things and giving me the opportunity to emphasise the fact that the Wakefield and the 9 towns will have vibrant high streets going forward because we are investing in them to make sure that they are the places that people will want to come and visit, live and work. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Byford there. I'm going to move on to Councillor Martin Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just surprised what I hear from Tony Benches about how well they are at running the economy and what they would do with the budget. And I'm also surprised what I think Councillor Sanders said, how well the Conservative-run parish council is, and they've been able to reduce their costs. Well, I'm surprised that it wasn't headhunted as an IT consultant to advise the Tory-run Nottinghamshire County Council last year before it actually went bust. So that's how good the Tories are at running a local authority. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Johnson. I'm going to go on to Councillor Maureen Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just want to add to the mental health debate. It is something that all of us across this chamber know that some of our residents are suffering, particularly because of the times we've been through over the last 12, 14 months. We all know that. We all realise that. We all realise that our residents actually do need more mental health support. I'm not going to reiterate what's just said, but I will add to what's been said, that during the leader's speech she alluded to the hubs that have been created across this district. There are 9 of them, and the Resident Recovery Board is planning and discussing with Turning Point talking therapies being delivered from all 9 hubs, and as soon as we get back to any sense of normality, then Turning Point will be in the hubs and they will be offering that mental health support for those people who are struggling. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cummings, and I can see a comment there from Councillor Nick Farmer. But what I'm going to do now, I think we're getting to the stage where we're going round and everybody's tending to agree with other people. So I'm going to move it on now by saying, asking Councillor Ahmed to take on and move as mover of the amendment. Would you like to sum up, and would you also like to answer a couple of questions that we started the questions off with from Councillor Morley in your 5 minutes, please? Thank you.
Yes, of course, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'll answer as many as I can in questions in relation to what has been answered. And I think start with Councillor Swift. And I think I've got a lot of respect for Councillor Swift, and I have to agree with him. I'm not a big fan of council tax. I'm not a big fan of taxing people to pay for certain things. I genuinely believe that people's money is better left in their pockets, and the taxation system has to be done in a more fair way, and in a fair way that actually makes it easier for certain people who cannot afford it, and those that can pay should pay. In relation to Councillor Gordon, I think really in a way I'm doing the Tory coalition. I'm just saving him from a Nick Clegg sort of a legacy. If he's seen to collude with the Conservatives, I don't want to end up poisoning his political career and ending up like Nick Clegg. But he ended up all right working for Google, I think. So if that's your option, you can be more than happy to work with you. In terms of Councillor Morley, and it's all I did that intentionally to wind you up, so thank you for that. And it is you did say that, and I've got your tweet from some of them years ago about it's unworkable, and you gave that example of the potholes repair. Now, the thing is, I'm going to be honourable, and I'm going to hopefully teach you something today. If the Conservative government do something wrong that I don't agree with, I will say that it's wrong. And I'm just wondering if you can do the same thing when your government or the Labour government in the past has also made the same mistakes. So in terms of adding, removing from the budgets and things like that, they are things of the past, and they have made a difference on council budgets. And there's no way I would hide and say anything other than that. So I believe that, all governments have made mistakes in relation to road repairs, potholes. And I've said that when we did HS2, I spoke against it, and I still speak against it. I'd rather see an integrated travel plan for West Yorkshire. And, we've got the mayor, hopefully a mayor coming up, and that would have been the right thing. So I will always speak when against whichever MP it might be or whichever person it was. So it's important that I'm sharing that with him as well in a respectful way. It does that. So if money was taken out, I don't agree with it. That's wrong. However,
Mr. Mayor, a point of order, please. Point of order, Mr. Mayor. We're not talking about the past. We're talking about the forthcoming budget allocation from the Department of Transport. Nothing to do with the past. The 22 it's across the country is 28%. For the Wakefield district and Yorkshire, about 22. It's £1.5 million. It's not the past.
No. Councillor
meant to refer to the standing orders.
Councillor Morley, can we just have a bit of order? Councillor Ahmed, can you address Councillor Morley's?
Yeah, and so Councillor Morley's should know the procedures anyway. He's been here long enough. So there is, if that's taken place, then that's wrong, Councillor Morley. You know, I mean, simple as that. And so it wasn't a point of order though, Mr. Mayor. Just to point out, it's not a procedural rule. It should have, if you wanted it, it could have been a point of personal clarification. It's below the point of order in the standard rule books of the council that's been printed years ago. But I'm going to point out something before I finish off here, and I'm more than happy to answer anybody's question. I've only got 5 minutes. General Reserve, 15 million. Earmarked Reserve, 94.1 million. Grants and contributions, 2.5 million. Ring-fenced Reserve, 6.3 million. April 2020, total reserves, 117.9 million. So that's the reserve budget in there. So I'm raising that in the council chamber, and I'm addressing that as sometimes I believe in keeping reserves, keeping valid reserves. I know there's a certain financial point that the council have to keep, and we've seen other councils not fall foul of that. So it's important to do that. But 117.9 million, it's currently in the reserves, and that's table 4 summary. And 2022 would see that go down to 116. And so it's important that I raise awareness of that. And like I've said, if there is if any government's done something wrong, you know what I mean, it's not, it's not the issue. But what I've seen today is that really not many of us have learned the lessons of COVID and that so-called working together and being kind and all that stuff. So what we've raised in the budget is things that I'm sure you will all morally at home agree with, but politically you can't agree with it because you've been asked to not agree with it. And that's the real underlying reason of really to look at hard, cold facts of why we entered politics, what the reason behind it was. And that's what I'm going to leave you with, because that's the important thing. And that is quite worrying, because that isn't it. But I could just say, Councillor Gordon, I'm more than happy to work with any councillor from any party, provided they're not from racist parties, but we haven't got any of them in Wakefield, thankfully. And so I'm more than happy to work with anybody in Wakefield from whatever party, whatever capacity, for the benefit of Wakefield. And that includes Nottingley. Did youth service there years ago voluntarily, and I'm more than happy to work with you, Labour councillors, Councillor Morley, in a very respectful way. But it's important that we hold you to account on certain things and address that potholes are an issue. You know that, Councillor Morley. I know that they'll be in your area, and had we been in your position, we would have probably been saying exactly the same things that you're saying. But we have to address these issues. That's the role of an opposition, to raise that issues. And if I need to write a letter to the Conservative government asking for more money, I'm more than willing to do that. I'm willing to speak to our MPs in Wakefield and ask them to do that as well. So there's absolutely no hiding away. I'm not going to hide away and pretend certain things aren't happening. I'm more than willing, and I'm sure everybody in the Conservative group is more than willing to challenge for the benefit of Wakefield.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ahmed, there on that one. You're summing up. We will now take the Conservative amendment budget to the vote. Clarify, this is to determine whether the amended budget from Councillor Ahmed should become the new substantive budget. We are required to take a recorded vote. And I'll now ask the Chief Legal Officer to take the recorded vote on the amended budget as put forward by the Conservative group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, I will call out your names, and I would be grateful if you could unmute and indicate whether you vote for the amendment or against it, please. Starting with Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Against.
Councillor Eyre. Councillor Eyre, could you vote again, please?
Councillor Eyre, we're not receiving you. Can you try it one more time? I'm going to turn my camera off and try it if it does that. Councillor Eyre, are you there?
Move on and I'll come back.
We'll come back to you, Councillor Eyre. Try again.
Councillor Mrs. Binns.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Blizzard.
Against.
Councillor Byford.
Against.
Councillor Ms. Carrington.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Collins.
Against.
Councillor Ms. Cruz.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Cummings.
Against.
Councillor Dagger.
Against.
Councillor Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Farmer.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Fishwick.
For.
Councillor Forster.
Against.
Councillor Alan Garbett.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Garbett.
Against.
Councillor Gordon.
Against.
Councillor Graham.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hemingway.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Heptonstall.
Against.
Councillor Heptonstall.
Against.
Councillor Hepworth.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Isherwood. That's Graham Isherwood, please.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Isherwood.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Jeffrey.
Against.
Councillor Carl Johnson.
For.
Councillor Martin Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Keith.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Kitchen.
Against.
Councillor Ms Loughran.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Lund.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Malkin.
Against.
Councillor Manifield.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Masterman.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Mitchell.
Against.
Councillor Morley.
Against.
Councillor Pitkin.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Rhodes.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Rowley.
Against.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Mrs Scott.
Against.
Councillor Shaw.
Against.
Councillor Ms Spate.
Against.
Councillor Ms Stansby.
For.
Councillor Stokes.
Councillor Stokes, are you with us?
Yeah, I said against.
Oh, sorry, against.
Thank you. Councillor Swift.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Taylor.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Tennant.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Tennant King.
Against.
Councillor Tully.
Against.
Councillor Wallace.
Against.
Councillor Ms Whitehouse.
Against.
Councillor Miss Williams.
Against.
I don't believe Councillor Womersley's on the meeting at the moment. I'll just double check that.
Yes, for Councillor Womersley, if you're there, can I have your vote, please?
It's been gone ages.
I thought he had, yeah.
Can we go back to Councillor Eyre?
Against.
Thank you.
Got you. You're lovely, George. Okay. So, that is defeated. The vote in favour of the proposals was 11. The vote against was 46, and with one abstention, that was myself. Thank you very much for that. That's how the record will read. We will now move on to the amendment submitted by the Liberal Democrat member, which has been circulated in advance of the meeting. Councillor Gordon, will you please move your amendment to Council, and you have 5 minutes in which to do this. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First things first, obviously, I'd like to just say thank you very much to Neil Warren and the team of officers that worked hard to make this possible. Obviously, it's a lot of time and effort that goes into both the Labour group, the Conservative amendment, and my own as well. And I'm proud that I've been able to put forward the first Liberal Democrats budget in best part of a decade, if not longer. Now, I expect that there will be political disagreement, and while that's fine and part and parcel of any sort of council budget meeting, What I do want to just add is that the reassurance that this has been given the seal of approval from professional officers who say that it is, on all intents and purposes, something that is deliverable. This is a budget that will speak to the concerns of residents that I represent in Nottingham and Ferrybridge, and as well it will speak to people across the district. This was something that was put together after having listened to residents and finding out their concerns. Obviously, over the last year now, we've had the world as we know it turned upside down with the COVID pandemic, and I do welcome the increase in spending that we're seeing on priorities that matter most to residents across this district that have been put forward as part of the controlling group's budget. The problem that I fundamentally have is that with this budget is it doesn't go far enough to address some of the very real problems and concerns that still will happen and are still to be addressed despite this budget. So in terms of what is in my budget amendment, it is about priorities, and one of the biggest, most pressing issues, and it's already been mentioned earlier today, is that going forward, the mental health issues that are facing not only adults and frontline workers, but our children too, across the district. We've heard from medical experts, doctors, that there's a substantial increase in the number of children with mental health issues, and it's important now more than ever before to make sure that we tackle these and try and make sure that, along with a year of schooling, which has not been normal, to try and tackle any mental health issues that young people face so that we don't end up with a lost generation. The budget amendment would use money that would have otherwise gone to councillors on special responsibility allowances or travel allowances and invest these directly in a new team of child adolescent mental health service staff. I can't see how anyone in all good conscience can disagree with this. What we do know is that I think it's over 2/3 of Labour councillors receive an additional special responsibility allowance. Now, when you look at comparable local authorities, they don't have deputy cabinet members, they don't have endless numbers of vice chairs or deputy chairs of committees. What we'd actually be doing is looking around to similar sized and similar Labour councils and actually putting our SRAs in line with those. I would also favour cutting travel allowances and moving to a hybrid or virtual option for meetings to make council both more accessible but also to save money that can be invested in frontline services too. The budget amendment that I put forward also has in there money for tackling crime, making our streets safer, investing more in play spaces and parks, going further and spending more and investing more than what the Labour group are proposing themselves. Another key point is that we will also be making sure that we put right the wrong that happened when Labour councillors decided years ago to demolish the sports centre, library and swimming pool in the town of Nottingham. We know, and we've been over this before at other council meetings, there was over 100,000 visitors a year. We've seen as well a local area master plan where one of the key concerns that residents had and one of the key findings of that master plan consultation was the lack of local facilities and services. We've had endless press release after endless press release over the last few years telling us how there's more than £50 million of investment coming to Nottingham and Ferrybridge, yet that still doesn't seem to be adding up. It's great and a fantastic opportunity that we're seeing investment in the community hub at the Kellingley Club, but this is not going to be a replacement for what Labour destroyed in the town. This is something that not only would have an impact on Nottingham, but also surrounding areas too. With thousands of new houses planned across the district, it's hard and difficult to justify expanding towns without building the facilities that go with it. Another key part of this budget as well would be doing away with the current cap that we have on grit bins across the entire area. Our highways teams worked really hard and fantastic to try and clear the roads and make them safe when we've had the really bad weather earlier this month. But fundamentally, we keep adding roads, we keep adding houses, and we don't add grit bins. It's another big issue, and I think people here will know firsthand themselves what the state of the roads were like in that time in other pockets where we didn't have services and highways out to deal with it. Residents I know in my ward struggled to get the snow warden packs and were told that they'd have to drive to depots to collect grit themselves, which sort of defeats the entire purpose, getting on icy roads to go collect salt from elsewhere when we should just have grit bins in the local area. Can
you wind it up now, Councillor Gordon? You've nearly had your 5 minutes.
In terms of this budget amendment, this is something that it's balanced, it's been signed off, and it's completely deliverable. There's nothing stopping Labour councillors deciding to put politics aside and invest in Nottingley in a way which residents want, rather than dictating to them what they should have. There's nothing stopping anyone seconding this motion and backing it, like we've done in other cross-party instances, like the motion on free school meals. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gordon. I'm now going to ask, is the amendment submitted by the Liberal Democrat member seconded? I'm going to ask once again, just in case there's any communications problems. Is the amendment submitted by the Liberal Democrat member seconded? As the amendment that's been put forward is not seconded, under the Council Procedure Rule 17, the motion is withdrawn and is not going to be debated. Thank you very much for that. We're going to move right on now to the amended budget falls, and now we revert back to the original budget as proposed by Councillor Mrs Jeffrey and set out in the agenda. Does any member wish to speak on the original budget? May I remind members that speeches must be directed to the questions under discussion or to a personal explanation or point of order. No speech must exceed 5 minutes. So thank you, colleagues. If you would like to indicate if you would like to indicate that you would like to speak to the original motion now. Okay, I'm going to take first one on that, and remember that you've got 5 minutes here. Councillor Ahmed.
I think a number of points have already been made, Mr Mayor, so I'll just keep this very short about council tax increases. But I would like clarification on why there wasn't additional usage of the revenue. So looking at what the figures that I've just mentioned in a comment back there, why the proposal wasn't looked at to reduce council tax and take out of the current 117 million. Why wasn't the option explored in there? I just think at this current stage, current moment in time, and the difficult time people have had over the number of years, with even, I just think it's the wrong time to be increasing council tax. I know people are saying it's 1.99, but the reality is 4%. It was 4% last year, and if we look at it over the course of the last 10 years, and we average that out, we're looking at 40% in increase. So it isn't. It's quite a lot of money for people. Someone even on a Band A property. I know we always use Band D as a reference point, but the lowest council tax band at this current moment in time has gone over £1,000. Over £1,000. And that's families where somebody's car insurance. They're making the tough choices between car insurance, food. We've seen that. It's families that we've probably never ever seen arriving at food banks. Seen it in Kettlethorpe. Other members have seen it in their families that we've never probably seen or heard of, previously are taking help from sources. You've seen universal credit uptake increase. Now, is it right at this moment in time? No. Now, that isn't, I believe in low taxation, but if I could, and I would ask all members to support council tax increase, had we been in better financial climates. So had we been, there'd been a recovery going on nationally, high levels of employment, wage growth, low inflation, then I'd say, yeah, why not? Why not? Let's go in and see what we can do extra for our residents. But, I want to express that point, but we look at using the reserves. So this year we could I know we have used the reserves a little bit in order to do a 0% council tax, which I would have preferred this year. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ahmed. If you're going to ask for questions, I did ask earlier on before we moved on, does any council member want any question of clarifications on the budget proposals? But I will ask Councillor Jeffries, who's going to come back and be given a chance to come back to take on board any questions that are raised. Thank you very much. Up next, I've got Councillor Steve Tully.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make a small contribution to support the budget today that's been put forward by the leader of the Labour group and Councillor Denise Jeffrey. And I've heard lots of comments in the last few hours about, we could have 5 extra mental health nurses and we could have X, Y, Z, and we could have a community bus and we could have X, Y, Z. Well, we can have it all because it's all included including the area of rural buses that's been touched on, including the area of city centre development and improvement. But let's look at this from a purely starting point of view. We went into this pandemic with 40,000 vacancies in the NHS, and I speak from experience. I speak from a person who has to sit at home and wait for his wife coming home from work most nights of the week, having done a 12, 14-hour shift on the COVID wards at Pinderfields Hospital. Has sat and nursed and held people's hand until they've died on a daily basis, including members of her family and including work colleagues that she's worked with in the wider community. And it's remiss to sometimes to suggest we need to take party politics out of it. There's one good thing today this government's got right, up to date, and that's the vaccine. Apart from the vaccine, this government is directly responsible for over 120,000 deaths in this country and created devastation across wide spectres of our community in Wakefield and across the county, which in turn has created major problems with mental health issues, kids not being able to go to school, trying to introduce popular policies that suit the particular agenda and support focus groups. And I think this budget going forward today is to try to do its level best to try to help all residents of Wakefield Council, wherever they come from, whoever they vote for. And when I start to say we don't need trade union representation, let me just make this point, shall I? Our dustbin lads, our emergency workers have been working round the clock. One could well argue from a trade union perspective, they were probably bursting the European Time Directive and working far too many hours, but they ain't done that. They have cooperated with our council to make sure that all these services have been delivered. So when I start hearing people talking about trade union representation and we shouldn't be paying for this and we shouldn't be paying for that, it's nothing in the scheme of things. These are all part and parcel that makes this council go around and makes it a better council for everybody across this district. And I'm prepared to work with anybody in this council. And I don't want to hear people saying, we've all been providing food banks, we've all been delivering parcels, we've all been getting that food out to because that's what we do. As community-minded people, that's what we do. But we must not try to suggest we shouldn't have a council tax increase, but we support the idea of the bit that goes on to social care. Last year, I was promised by this government an oven-ready deal, that we're going to deal with social care once and for all. From a Tory government that we're going to finally put it to bed. And as Betty Rhodes and other people have said quite clearly, we're still waiting for it. But we can't have it both ways. We can't have a situation where we don't want to support a council tax rise because it affects the most vulnerable and the most poorly paid in our county, but then we're still prepared to accept that we've got to stick 2% on that should be paid out in national taxes. We can't have it both ways. But I think this budget overall, it's a clear attempt to try to look after everybody in the area and the pandemic that we've been in. But for God's sake, let's just at least try to make sure that nobody is here to try to pull anybody down. But I think this council in this last 12 months has done its level best and will continue to do its level best to try to support the people across Wakefield and across all the 5 towns and across the small villages and the towns which we all come to Wakefield to serve. And I find it sometimes a little bit disingenuous sometimes when we start talking about free parking this and free parking that. You know, if you're left to me, in an ideal situation, we'd never have to pay for parking. We're paying enough, but life ain't like that. And it were Tory governments in the past that introduced car parking. It were Tory governments in the past that introduced car parking at hospitals and made our staff going to work on nights paid to park the cars. So I don't need lectures from Tory group in Wakefield Council telling me how they were the inventors of free parking. It's cobblers. Please support the budget put forward by the controlling Labour group. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tully. And moving on for a comment from Councillor Carl Johnson, please.
Hi, I just want to ask the same question again about these reserves. If the government spent billions and billions and billions and billions of pounds, and we're actually making money in Wakefield and creating reserves, when do we actually spend reserves? Shouldn't we investing money into our local businesses when they reopen? And can I just say to Mr. Tolley as well, I try to keep away from national politics, and I'm here for Wakefield, but it seems to have a massive forgetful nature. But it's 18 months ago, in fact less, since we had an election where we decisively won the national election. But Corbyn seems to get forgotten. Would we have actually wanted Corbyn in this pandemic? That's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I'm moving on to Councillor Michael Graham for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to bring this debate back to the positives, really, and what we've actually got in this budget here. I think a massive thank yous in order to our leader, Councillor Denise Jeffrey, and our deputy leader, Councillor Jack Hemingway, for what they've put together here with the advice and support of our officers. This is an absolutely brilliant budget, and it is reaching every single corner of our district and improving everyone's lives. And at the end of the day, I know we have our disagreement in this chamber and virtually on this computer, but we are all here, and I know that deep down, deep down for the Conservatives, but deep down, everyone wants to make a difference to residents of Wakefield and improve their lives. And so it's a thank you to them, really. I think the consultation this year has been better than ever. It's listening to what residents' priorities are, and it's putting the money in the places that people want to see it put. So all of the arguments aside, I'd like to thank again Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Hemingway and everyone else who has put into making this brilliant budget.
Thank you for that, Councillor Graham. On to next, and a comment from Councillor Pauline Kitchen. Councillor Kitchen, now you're unmuted, my dear. Can you speak to me?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment, albeit it does have obviously positive content to it, about this budget that I know will make a big impact on families all over our district. I'm pleased to hear of the investments going to open spaces and parks, especially Valehead Park, which the residents whom I represent will greatly benefit from. Historically, many families have enjoyed spending time there, and these improvements will not only improve their health and well-being, it will also help and contribute to the climate change programme that we now have in place. Troubled families will also continue to get the financial support that it needs, which obviously I'm sure we all welcome. House building programme, for the first time council houses being built for public renters, building better communities throughout our district for all to enjoy. Homelessness, rough sleepers, help to improve their lives and promote stability can only be a good thing. This budget is going to help and improve and maintain our services in the best way possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kitchen. I'm going to move on for the final comment that I've got up here to Councillor Jackie Spade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do support this budget. I think a great attempt has been made in this budget to improve the lives of people right across the district, and I think we should be proud of that, just as I'm proud of how we have helped people through the pandemic, people who have struggled in our area, residents. This council has done everything that it can to help them, and particularly those who are in poverty. And the budget actually builds on that, so I'm absolutely delighted with it. But there is just one thing that I want to comment on personally that pleases me, and that is the investment in parks. Again, the pandemic has shown how much we value open spaces, that we appreciate just the delight of being in the outdoors and enjoying it, and it means so much to people, and I think it's brilliant that we're doing that. And I'm particularly pleased to hear the comments by Councillor Hemingway that Welbeck is going to be made into a country park. That is great news for the people of Altos and of Normanton, so absolutely fabulous to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of the comments and questions that are coming up. Thank you, colleagues, and that concludes the debate on the proposed budget. Councillor Jeffrey, as mover of the Cabinet recommendations, you now have the right to reply. the debate and take no longer than 5 minutes to do so. Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will be brief. We've had a long afternoon, and I know that some of people's internets are not as good as they can be. And I do think that we're all missing being in the council chamber and seeing the whites of each other's eyes across the chamber is much better than seeing the photographs on the screen. I make no apologies for this budget. This budget is a budget for growth. It's a bold budget, and it helps every part of this district. I meet so many of you from different areas, from the southeast, all over the district. And as I say, our 9 towns, 1 city, we're trying to reach out to every one of them. And some of the towns and cities perhaps haven't been involved as much as we could have been over the past. But they are going to be now, and we are going to make sure that everyone gets a benefit. We spent the last year looking after people. I feel we've been running 2 agendas. One's been looking after people, and my goodness, our workforce and all our colleagues, all of us have done our best to look after communities. But we're also running another agenda, and it's growth and prosperity for our district, working with businesses across the 5 towns, 9 towns, I keep getting mixed up with that, but the 9 towns, 1 city. It's very important that we do that. On the council tax, nobody wanted to put the council tax out. 199 would have been okay. But the fact that the government are insisting that we put 2% in for social care, they actually told us we should put 3 in. And most authorities around here have actually put 3 in, but we didn't, we put 2 in. And yes, Carl, we have got some reserves, and that's been because we've been cautious and prudent over the years, and we've brought a lot of investment into this district. With our local development framework plan, we made sure that we built more houses in this district than anyone else in West Yorkshire. And we were ready with our plans before anybody else in West Yorkshire. And that's why people came here. That's why developers came here and built houses. And we brought money into our coffers. Yes, we could have gone into reserves. We did go into reserves for nearly 4 million. But we have to think about the future, and we have to build on the future. And we never know what might come along. We might need some of those reserves for other things. And it's not that we're adverse to cutting into the reserves. If we need to do it for projects or whatever we need to do, we will look at that. And I'm sure Neil, who's been mentioned a lot today, will be wondering what we're going to cut into next. But Neil, our finance officer, is very careful and makes sure that we all do the right thing. And I'm sure he did advise you all on what could be done and what couldn't be done. But on the council tax, we made a decision. We actually look after so many people who are struggling to pay the council tax, and we have a system in place where people don't get evicted, don't have the worry, and we make sure that we look after them. So I make no apologies for that. It's something that we've done. We don't want to pay the social care, and the government should have done it. Your government should have done what they promised years ago, and they haven't done. And that's where we're falling down. I think perhaps, Mr. Mayor, you're probably going to tell me I've had my 5 minutes. I'll wind up now, but I will commend this budget to you. It's a budget for growth. It's a budget for all our district. Thank you.
Thank you once again for that, Councillor Jeffries. You did have a minute left, actually. I wasn't going to interrupt you. There you are. What we're going to move on to now then is a recorded vote, and we are required to take this recorded vote, and we'll now do that on agenda items 5 and 6 of the revenue budget and the council tax proposals, the capital and investment strategy, the capital programme and treasury management strategy reports. I will now ask the Chief Legal Officer to take the recorded vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then, procedure councillors, I will call your name. If you could unmute and let us know whether you are for, against the budget, or if you wish to abstain. Starting with Councillor Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Austin. For. Councillor Eyre.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Binns.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Blizzard.
For.
Councillor Byford.
For.
Councillor Ms Carrington.
For.
Councillor Mrs Collins.
For.
Councillor Ms Cruz.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Cummings.
For.
Councillor Dagger.
For.
Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Farmer.
Against.
Councillor Fishwick.
Against.
Councillor Forster.
For.
Councillor Alan Garbett.
For.
Councillor Mrs Garbett.
For.
Councillor Gordon.
Against.
Councillor Graham.
For.
Councillor Mrs Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Hemingway.
For.
Councillor Mrs Heptonstall.
For.
Councillor Heptonstall.
For.
Councillor Hepworth. Councillor Hepworth.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Graham Isherwood.
For.
Councillor Mrs Isherwood.
For.
Councillor Mrs Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Carl Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Martin Johnson.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Keith.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Ms Loughran.
For.
Councillor Mrs Lund.
For.
Councillor Mrs Malkin.
For.
Councillor Manifield.
For.
Councillor Mrs Masterman.
For.
Councillor Mrs Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Morley.
For.
Councillor Ms Pickin.
For.
Councillor Mrs Rhodes.
For.
Councillor Mrs Rowley.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
Against.
Councillor Mrs Scott.
For.
Councillor Shaw.
For.
Councillor Ms Spate.
For.
Councillor Ms Stansby.
Against.
Councillor Stokes.
For.
Councillor Swift.
For.
Councillor Mrs Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Tennant.
For.
Councillor Mrs Tennant King.
For.
Councillor Tully.
For.
Councillor Wallace.
For.
Councillor Ms Whitehouse.
For.
Councillor Ms Williams.
For.
And Councillorwoman Lee is not present. Just tally that up for you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for going through that. I'll get you the results through. I think that the motion was carried, but I've got the details here. All in favour of the budget proposals were 45, all against was 12, and there was one abstention, which was myself. And so I think that motion is carried. And thank you very much for your votes on that. That was the last item on the agenda. And don't forget to nominate your people for the Mayor Says Thanks Award, which must be in by next Monday, to get out the pat on the back for people who's been working at the forefront. And can I remind members that the next meeting of the Council is on the 24th of March 2021. Thank you for your attendance. Keep safe, keep well. And I now declare the budget meeting closed and ask for the live streaming